a nossa primeira mesa, né? Vou começar pela ordem de apresentações também. Vou começar pelo professor Christoph Schneider, geógrafo físico e climatólogo, que visita São Paulo, como a Catarina já mencionou, na sua função de vice-presidente de pesquisa da Humboldt-Universität de Berlim e como membro do Executive Board da famosa BUA, da Berlin University Alliance. Em sua pesquisa, o professor Schneider se concentra nos efeitos das mudanças climáticas sobre as geleiras da Terra e em questões de controle do clima e da poluição do ar nas cidades. Tem ampla experiência de pesquisa e com colegas na América do Sul, como na Argentina e no Chile, por exemplo, né, entre outros países. O professor Paulo Artaxo é professor de Física Ambiental na Universidade de São Paulo, a USP. O professor Artaxo desenvolveu sua carreira trabalhando com o meio ambiente amazônico e as mudanças climáticas globais e se destaca com participação em órgãos prestigiosos como o IPCC, o Painel Intergovernamental de Mudanças Climáticas da ONU, a Associação Brasileira para o Progresso da Ciência, além de muitos prêmios internacionais, uma imensidão de publicações científicas, que eu não vou citar agora, mas vocês podem depois também entrar no nosso site para entender melhor. Paulo Artaxo está hoje aqui na sua função como coordenador do Centro de Estudos da Amazônia Sustentável, o famoso CAS, que gentilmente recebe o nosso evento hoje. E, last but not least, a mediadora excelente dessa mesa, né, que vamos abrir depois das duas palestras, Gabriela Marques di Giulio, é professora associada do Departamento de Saúde Ambiental da Faculdade de Saúde Pública da Universidade de São Paulo. Seu trabalho acadêmico se concentra nas interações entre ambiente e sociedade e nas interfaces ciência-política, particularmente sobre os impactos das crises ambientais em contextos socioculturais. Na USP, Gabriela coordena o programa de pós-graduação em saúde global e sustentabilidade e atua como vice-coordenadora do CAS. The floor is yours, queridos palestrantes. Christoph Schneider, por favor. You have the honor to start this panel. Welcome.
Obrigado, Laura. Obrigado a todos. I would be able to speak maybe at some extent in Spanish, but I will not manage in Portuguese. So bear with me. I have to change to English. And it's great that we have this multilingual event today, and it's an honor for me to be invited here for this conference and to the Universidade de São Paulo. I had a great day already, had a great week, and so thanks a lot to everybody. And hopefully I can share something with you now today, which is hopefully a little bit of inspiring for you. The title says, and I think that has been set up by you, Laura, from global to local. I actually am not so sure whether it's not also from local to global, because it's the local activities everywhere in the world that somehow produce the footprint of humanity that has then somehow an effect on the planet at a global scale. And at the same time, it's what happens globally in terms of climate change, in terms of biodiversity crisis and other economic and sociological things that are interconnected around the world that have an effect locally on the communities and on each and every one of us. So it's certainly a bidirectional relation, this global and local. Well, let me just start right off with two examples of actual research from Germany, one from colleagues at the University of Augsburg, one that my own group has been doing in Berlin, and then let me extend from those two examples to a more framework type approach. So this first slide that I'm showing you is a work from the University of Augsburg, a very young group that deals with health issues related to climate change and climate in general, and they have been doing a work on the evolution of the recent ecological niche of Aedes albopictus in Europe, which I guess you know as the vector that transfers some of the serious diseases. There is only very few cases of infections with tropical diseases in Europe where people have not been in the tropics before the disease broke out in their body. But there are some cases. Now, but when you look at the overall distribution of where this insect could survive, you can see that with climate zones extending more north and north over this century, there is the possibility that these tropical or subtropical diseases may actually occur in a pandemic way, or pandemic is not the right word, but in a widespread way within Europe. So I think there is something we can learn from you, because we have actually not much knowledge on how to deal with this, while in Latin America you have a big deal of experience with these kind of vector-borne diseases. So climate preparedness includes that we are looking in this direction. Well, the model that's behind this simulation here that simply tells you that between 2000 and 2020, there has indeed been, well, the colors are not actually showing up very good, but there has been there has been, with ongoing climate warming, an intensification of this niche where this insect could survive potentially. Actually, the insect is there already, but very widespreadly distributed. Now, the model includes both land use change and climate change signals. And that's a profound finding here, that looking only at the land use change or looking only at the climate change signal doesn't give you the full breadth of the story. That's really important. Now let me move on to the other example that's from my own lab, where we have been looking at trees as indicators of urban heat island. We've been using tree samples both from the city center of Berlin and also from the vicinity around Berlin. Berlin has a huge area of very little populated lands around the metropolitan area, which is around 4 million people, so it's small compared to Sao Paulo. Then we've been drilling, taking samples from those trees, around 250 trees at 20 sites, to have a good sample of different trees. You can see there is an example here, one of those cores where you then count the tree ring width, and then you can correlate the width of the tree ring with the climate signals. And then we have been looking at those different sites that we've been investigating, and we've been looking at what's the urbanity. So we set up a proxy for urbanity in the vicinity of the trees, and we've also found out that this microclimate signal extends to around 3,000 meters around the site, so 3 kilometers. We're taking into account things like building height, vegetation height, but also other parameters of land use. And then we've been correlating, and that's basically also the finding, we've been correlating the R values that you can calculate between the tree ring width and the climate signal for different parameters like temperature and precipitation and aridity index, and then correlating those R values of the different sites with the urbanity index. And what you are seeing in the graph is this correlation. What it shows is that when the urbanity index increases, also the correlation between the tree ring width and the climate signal increases and actually reaches values well beyond the significance level. What does it mean? It means that trees that are under urban stress are reacting stronger to climate extremes than trees outside of the city. And those trees are very similar to humans, because of the urban heat island, the climate extremes that you experience in the city, and the other environmental stress that is in the city, like the air quality loads and so forth, all that connects to the fact that humans are much more stressed by climate extremes in the city than in the countryside. So there is obviously something that we have to deal with, and that brings me directly into climate change. This is an example of a work that's been done by Christoph Schneider and others at the University of Zurich after the summer of 2003. The summer of 2003 in Middle Europe was a summer of an extreme long heat period where you can see that the mean value of the summer temperature in this period from July and August 2003 was way beyond anything that has been in the last 150 years before. So the probability for such a hot summer would be 1 in 10,000. And there have been around 70,000 casualties due to this heat wave in Europe, and that has actually been the most dramatic natural catastrophe that we had since the end of the Second World War. So it's in the last 80 years or so. Now, if you're doing a climate simulation and you look at what is the distribution in the climate model for the summer temperatures, it also follows a Gaussian distribution. And then if you look into the same climate model and you look at what this climate model projects for the end of the century, you're seeing summer temperatures that are actually in the same range as the summer temperature in 2003. And that means that at the end of the century, every second summer will be as hot as the one that caused 70,000 extra death in 2003. So there's obviously something we have to adapt to. Right, now we are in the middle of climate change, and my work has always been related to glaciers. That's why I have to show you a picture of glaciers here. This is the change of the Great Alert Glacier. This is the longest valley glacier in Switzerland and the European Alps, well, all over the European Alps. And you can see its dramatic change from 1900 to 2000. So this is just 100 years. The glacier has retreated by around 2 kilometers. It has been lowered by several hundreds of meters. And that's a climate change cyclone quite clearly. And so, well, there's people saying that climate is also always going up and down. There's climate variability through the Earth's history. So what's so special about the 20th century in terms of climate? If you look at the movement from the last glacial maximum to the Holocene period that we are living in, that has been a period of 5,000 years from around 20,000 before today until 15,000 before today, and the warming has been around 5 degrees globally. That means it's from the Ice Age to the Holocene, it's 1 degree warming in 1,000 years. What we are seeing in the 20th century is 1 degree warming in 100 years. That is, the conclusion is that humanity is changing climate at a pace that's at least 10-fold faster than at any other time during recent Earth history. And that's a very conservative estimate. That means that we are coming here from the Holocene, and then from the 20th to the 21st century, we're moving into something where when we go back in history, we have no knowledge about. This is a void space. We have no idea of what the global climate actually, how it will play out locally at the end of the century. We have a lot of projections. But do we really know what it means in the end? I don't think we do. Yeah? So you know that this is the hockey stick curve. Yeah? So a very flat climate signal over the Holocene. That's the last 1,000 years. And then it goes up like this. That's the hockey stick. But if you look into other parameters, you're seeing lots of hockey sticks in any kind of Earth system trends or socioeconomic trends, whether that is population, or large dams, or water use, or international tourism, or if you look into carbon dioxide, or surface temperature, or ocean acidification, you have this hockey stick kind of everywhere. So what does it mean? We are in this great acceleration that we call the Anthropocene. So climate change is just a tiny bit of the story. That's the Anthropocene. Some 50 years ago, the Club of Rome already had an idea about this problem, setting up this nice little model, the Earth system model, in a very simple way, but very effective, and the limits to growth documents that it's really worth going back to this document and also seeing how things have evolved unfortunately very much in line of their finding, which is that we are going towards a crisis in the 21st century. Then later, in 2009, actually for the first time, the planetary boundaries have been developed and published by others around Johann Rockström and many others. I'm citing here Steffen et al. From 2015, that was already the update, where they now identify precisely what could be those global planetary boundaries that we have to adhere. And here is, you can see that it's biosphere integrity and it's the biochemical flows related to international industrialized agricultural productivity, that where we are really beyond the zone of uncertainty in an area of high risk, while climate change is still yellow. Now, 10 years later, I would say we are already approaching here into the realm of the high risk and red zone. Oh, so far so bad. So what we're going to do with this? The fact that it's a biodiversity crisis much more than a climate crisis came again to me when I visited the fantastic exhibition at the Itaú Cultural in the Avenida Paulista just 2 days ago, where I came then across these great drawings of the biodiversity by Carl Philipp von Martius. It has been published around 1823. And then also something that occurred to me the day before I was actually at this exhibition. I was invited by Antonio Saraiva and Laura Kemmer and others to go to this pristine Atlantic rainforest in the proximity of Sao Paulo out to Los Santos. And I learned from Antonio that only around 8% of the original Atlantic rainforest in Brazil remain today. And that is only after a few hundred years of colonial occupation of the continent. And that's quite amazing. I deliberately choose this picture here because you can see here on the horizon the skyline of the high-rise buildings of Los Santos. So you can really see how the impact of humanity approaches these last remaining parts of this fantastic Atlantic rainforest areas. And I would very much hope that Brazil and that the world take every step to protect the remains of this precious ecosystem. Now, so we have climate change here represented by the Great Aletsch Glacier, and we have the biodiversity loss that kind of make up the perfect storm. Yeah? And the biodiversity loss here is represented by the fantastic drawing by Carl Philipp von Martius. So, however, it's not about natural science because we are in the Anthropocene, so it doesn't make sense to only look at these from a natural scientist point of view, obviously. And that's why I think that the Sustainable Development Goals, they provide the proper framing to address this issue. And I was part in the audience of a lecture given by Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs was the advisor to the former United Nations president at the time when Ban Ki-moon was setting up this Sustainable Development Goal profiling here. And Jeffrey Sachs was at the Technical University of Berlin for the Mercator Climate Lecture in 2016. And this sentence that he had in his talk was something that kind of follows me until today in my research agenda. He says, united they stand and divided they fall. And he meant climate action in terms of the Paris Agreement on the one hand and the Sustainable Development Goal framework adopted by the United Nations on the other hand. But actually, and finally, climate action is only one of 17 goals. So the whole climate crisis that we are having so much on our agenda is only a small portion of what's actually on stake in terms of taking really stewardship for the planet. Now, united they stand, divided they fall. And you could argue if there is not a biophysical foundation, then socio-economic systems will not be able to develop properly. So there's people that suggest that we are taking SDG number 6, 13, 14, and 15, which is climate and life below water and life on land and clean water and sanitation, make them as a base, and then arrange the other SDGs kind of on top of that. But this is actually, I think, a very arrogant way putting it from the perspective of Central Europe or North America. Because if you are in a situation where you struggle with a decent economic growth, or with no hunger, or with gender equality issues, which is here in SDG number 5, then there is no way having a society, having a political system follow in protecting climate and land on life on Earth and life on the water if the basic needs of people are not somehow respected. And I think the first one who clearly saw this was Kate Raworth introducing the donut theory, 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. I think this is a really important book because what she says is it's not only about respecting the ecological ceiling and going beyond the limits of the planet, it's also avoiding the shortfall of the social foundation. So somehow securing everything that people need, like education and food and water and energy and the political voice and so forth, needs to be somehow in a balance with using the planet, not overusing the planet. And what you end up with is a kind of a ring structure that she calls the donut. And then if you project that, then you have the social foundation, and you have the economic ceiling, and you have in between, in a ring-oriented form, the safe and just space for humanity. And I think this is a great advancement beyond Johan Rockström's idea of the planetary boundaries. And then, obviously, those scientists took up the challenge and set up a framework for studying these safe and just Earth system boundaries. That's the Johan Rockström and others paper that was published in April 2023. I think it's Nature. Is it Science? It's Nature. Yeah. So then finally, somehow, this is a graph that's also funny because it has the right idea of projecting the Sustainable Development Goals onto the global planetary boundaries. But again, you can see that this arrow hits the center of the graph. But in the center of the graph, there is the social shortfall of everything. There is no nutrition. There is, well, there could be a pristine planet, but then there would be no Homo sapiens. That's not the solution that we are looking at. So I think it should rather look like that. We have to project all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals into this donut of the just and safe operating space for humanity. Now, bear with me for 1 or 2 minutes still, because I would want also to take another perspective. And instead of from global to local or from local to global, let me put a perspective from global to personal and then from personal to global as well. You're seeing here the Great Ice Glacier again, so setting up the timeline from 1850 here until 2100 with these images dating from 1900 and 2000. And then I'm projecting here the lifespan of my 2 grandfathers together from 1892, the one, and the other died then, the second one died in 1987. You see me sitting as a 4-year-old in between. The picture is taken in 1969. That is the lifespan of people living in the 20th century. They had no idea of the biodiversity crisis, at the least not in the majority of society. They had no idea of the climate crisis. So they were struggling, bringing humanity forward. In the case of Europe, they've been surviving 2 world wars. They've been building up Germany again and then again. Yeah? And they were very positive with the prospects of the development that could there be for Europe, but also for the world altogether. And then you see my lifespan, hopefully extending until the middle or maybe a little bit beyond the middle of the 21st century. And I can't say I don't know. So if I'm taking the aircraft from Berlin to Sao Paulo, investing 10 tons of carbon dioxide back and forth, I must have a really good reason. And I've been thinking a lot whether I should take that 10 tons, invest them to come here as a representative of Humboldt-Universität, or whether I could do that differently. And I think it's important to challenge yourself with every journey that you take, with every consummation that you take. Really, is it worthwhile? Is it really needed? I think here it's needed. At least at the end of this week, I can say yes. I think it's good that we are taking a personal conversation together, Sergio, and that we're advancing things. But then look at students that probably were born around 2004. Their lifespan extends until the end of the century. Typically, our climate change projections end at the 21st century, but that doesn't mean that the world ends at 2100. So my granddaughter, Marie, she is born in 2011. She has a life expectancy that goes well beyond into the 22nd century. Yeah? So those that are affected, those that have to take the responsibility for the risk that we are taking, or that we have been taking over the last 50 years in this great acceleration, they are already there. We have to take the responsibility, and we have to educate the next generation of those leaders that can challenge the sustainability transformation beyond the 21st century into the 22nd century. And that means for me that both as single individual, but also as communities, as countries, as politicians, in every decision that we take, we have to challenge ourselves. Is the decision that we take a decision that puts us into climate resilient pathways, or is this a decision that brings us towards pathways that lower resilience? Are we going to transfer our planet into the possible future with high resilience and low risk, or are we rather going in the direction of low resilience and high risk planet? That's the challenge. And what I would want to end with is, this is not about hope. There's no question about where do we have a chance or not. I don't like this question at all. It's about having the courage to move on and to make a better world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, dear Christoph. And we will directly move on to Paulo and have the second keynote. Okay. And after that, Gabriela will open for discussion.
Sorry? Oh, yeah. Which one? This one. Yeah. Okay, thanks for the opportunity to put this into discussion. You will see that at least 6 or 7 slides from my presentation are actually the same as Christoph. This means something. Let's take a different approach for each of these slides, you know. So first and foremost, before we discuss, you know, the global health, you know, I think it is very important to see that actually, you know, we are in a crossroad right now. We are living in a very critical timing. Basically, not just because of climate change, you know, but also biodiversity loss, the threats to artificial intelligence, the very high inequality, you know, urban air pollution, pandemics, lack of happiness, lack of peace, and so on. And as researchers, we have to ask ourselves, you know, how could science help humanity to go the best possible way along this critical crossroad we are right now. Each one doing your own job on your own profession. I think that is very, very important. You saw this already from Christoph, you know, but basically you see the tremendous change. We take over the planet. That is the real truth. We are just one species, and we are here only over the last 200,000 years in this planet. The planet has 4.7 billion years. We are in a very, very short time frame of the whole life of the planet, and we are changing the face of the planet tremendously. both from the socioeconomic point of view that put pressure on the energy system that you are changing dramatically. And this is very nicely shown in the recent World Economic Forum Global Risk Report in 2025, you know. So for the 2025, they put the second risk is the increase of climate extremes, an environmental risk, and the seventh one is the dysregulation of the global climate system. But if you go for the next 10 years, which would be the 10 largest challenges that we have, you will see that half of them is environmental related, and most of them associated with the climate change. This is not just done by scientists, this is not just by environmentalists, these are economists from the Davos meeting. So their task is to make their bosses get as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. And they are seeing the environmental crisis, you know, as a major issue in terms of the economics for the whole world. So this means something to all of us. Christoph, again, you know, showed the planetary boundary. But my approach will be the 3 papers on the planetary boundaries, you know. You see the 2023, actually from the 9 boundaries that the Rockstrom listed, 6 of them we already crossed. So this means, again, lots of things for us, you know. We are in a very special timing of human evolution. And the reason for that is this plot. We are just here on this meeting discussing because of this time series of greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, we are emitting 57.1 billion tons of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere every single year. And the atmosphere is a very, very, very thin reservoir. 80% of the atmosphere mass is within the first 17 kilometers. It's more or less from USP to downtown São Paulo. It's a very short and very small reservoir, and we're putting 57 billion tons of greenhouse gases every year, so you can see the results. And central to this discussion is the energy issue, you know. So basically, fossil fuel dominates the energy production. That energy is what drives our economy worldwide. And you see that from the amount of oil, natural gas, and coal that you burn today, 81% came from fossil fuel. But another important lesson, there are alternative models to generate energy. And Brazil is a beautiful example of that. If you get how the G20 generates electricity, you know, Brazil is in the very, very first place in terms of renewable energy, with more than 85% of renewable energy. Not even any other country, including Germany, came as close to Brazil in terms of renewable energy. This means something. There is another possible future for the planet. And Brazil is giving the example on how this can be done. But also, we have the other side, you know. So in terms of emissions of greenhouse gases, 48% of our emissions are actually from biomass burning. But this is also a very good news. Why? Because no other country can reduce 50% of your emissions in a very short time, in a very cheap way, with lots of co-benefits. So again, Brazil is in a very unique position in terms of reducing emission, build up a sustainable society. And you can see here that over the last 4 years, Brazil have reduced 64% of the emissions from biomass burning, and we aim to get zero deforestation by 2030, and we all should work hard for that. Biomass burning makes aerosols over half of South America, carbon monoxide poisoning our air very, very strongly. Last September, it was a very curious situation. I never saw that. I studied air pollution for the last 40 years. We had 10 days in São Paulo where most of the air pollutant did not come from the 8 million cars we have in the city. Our air quality standard was well above WMO. Why? Because of biomass burning came from 2,000 kilometers from Amazonia. It's really weird. It's really strange. So we needed to pay attention to this small thing. And then we all know that we are heating up the planet in a very, very, very strong way. And then also what we do not discuss too much is that if you heat the planet by 1.6 degrees, actually 75% of the surface of the planet is ocean, is water. Water has a very high heat capacity. So what means? The continents where we live are heating up much more than the global average. So actually, we are in about 2.2 degrees already in terms of heating over pre-industrial conditions right now. So where our society is developed, actually, we surpass very much the 1.5 degrees. And 2023 and 2024 are very special years in terms of heating. There are a lot of scientific discussions why that is happening, but for sure, if you see here, you see a tremendous acceleration of climate change. Will this be sustainable in the next years? We don't know. But that's a clear message that we could be making a destabilization of the climate system by several different reasons. And then also, in addition to the atmosphere, also the ocean heating up. And this is, for the atmosphere, this is very interesting because it shows month by month, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, look what happens after the 80s from the last century, you know? So it's a tremendous acceleration of global warming. And then you see very clear our effects over the last, let's say, 30, 40 years. So we should actually work hard to avoid that this curve goes like this. And that is possible for sure. So a recent report from UNEP shows that indicates that with the current policies, we could be going to a 3.1 in terms of average heating of the planet. That's more or less twice what we are getting today. And basically, this will bring a lots of different societies, economy, and social issues for the whole population. But the global average does not mean anything because nobody lives in the global planet. So actually, if you look for the geographical distribution of a 3 degrees hotter planet from the latest IPCC report, you'll see that Brazil will heat up by 4.5 degrees. The Siberia and also Canada will heat up by about 6.57 degrees. So this is a huge change in the ecosystem, a very, very fast change. So no ecosystem will have the timing to adapt such fast and huge change. But the climate is not just temperature. Precipitation is also changing very much. We see that in Brazil very nicely, even yesterday night in São Paulo, you know. So you see, for instance, that the central part of Brazil will be much drier than it was 30, 40, or 50 years ago. This is an important lesson for Brazil. You know, we have to think about our future because a country that depends so much on agribusiness could not be very profitable in the very near future. So we have to think in another Brazil, because just producing soybean and meat will not really be as good as it was a few decades ago. And then we see the climate extremes exploding everywhere, you know, so this is the most visible component of climate change. And the IPCC predicts that one event that was happening every 50 years before Industrial Revolution will happen 39 times more frequent and will be 5 times stronger. So this is a very clear message what will be the future of humanity and the climate in our planet. So we have to adapt to this new climate. It will be possible for some regions, but it will also be impossible for others. Even if you look for São Paulo, you saw what happened yesterday night, you know. In São Paulo, this is mostly precipitation from 1935 until recently. Is increasing slowly, as predicted, but more important than that, if you look for the number of days with the precipitation larger than, let's say, 100 millimeters, basically this was multiplied by 4. So when it rains much more than before. And there are physical reasons for that. And the physical reasons is the Clausius-Clapeyron equation that shows that for every degree that you increase in temperature, basically the atmosphere can hold 7% more water vapor without condensation. What this means is that when you start a precipitation, when you start rain, we will have much more water come down at the same time than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So physics explained this very nicely, so it's absolutely no surprise. And the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere is increasing. So you see this recent compilation from Copernicus, so that 2023 and 2024 was absolutely record in terms of water vapor in the atmosphere. And one important point is that water vapor, in addition to make precipitation, is a very strong greenhouse gases. This is an important message, so we could have positive feedbacks in this sense. And Brazil, this is a recent compilation published a few weeks ago from Map Biomas water. So what happens is that from the 1,000 Cerrado municipalities, 76% of these municipalities are losing water. So Brazil is becoming much drier, and that is a very, very high-resolution remote sensing measurements. It's not modeling, it's not local measurements. So basically, what you see that Brazil will have to think carefully about our future. And then just 2 slides on Amazonia, because Amazonia is an important issue for Brazil and for the global planet. Basically, Amazonia, with emission of greenhouse gases, of deforestation and emission of greenhouse gases, is feeding up the warming of the planet. But at the same time, there is a much less talked subject. That is the increase in temperature and reducing precipitation are changing the climate in Amazonia, causing forest degradation. So what happens is that the forest is starting to lose carbon to the global atmosphere, instead, through photosynthesis, absorbing carbon. Why this is important? Because Amazonia holds 120 billion tons of carbon. That is equivalent to about 10 years of global fossil fuel burning. If this carbon goes to the atmosphere, all that IPCC scenario becomes chilled play. So basically, this is something that is very, very important message. And we are not far away from the critical transitions in the Amazon. So there was a very nice paper that was cover of Nature last November that shows clearly through hydrological and ecological simulations over the whole Amazonia that parts of Amazonia could be very close to a critical transition in the ecosystem where a tropical forest could not exist anymore. So basically, these are clear message from science. So just going to finish, Christoph also showed this slide, because actually, this decade, we'll have to decide which trajectory we will go. But more important than that is this question. Who will decide which of these pathways we will follow? Who will decide is Elon Musk and Trump? Is the whole society? How will set up a governance to decide which trajectory humanity will follow over the next 10 years? Because these 10 years will be critical for the future of the planet. And then it's also important that you have to deal with all the 4 different climate issues at the same time, and actions in one part of this diagram will affect all the other parts in the other diagram. We have to work on the drivers, we have to work on the effects, also on the mitigation of emissions, as well as climate change adaptation. This is a very complex task. It's not trivial, it's not easy. Most of these things can only be done locally, like adaptation. Others have to be done globally without any governance and things like that. So basically, this is the size of the challenge that we are having. In the World Health Organization developed a very nice concept, where the health of the environment, health of the animals, and health of the humans have to be worked together in the one health concept. So basically integrating, and dealing with the same organizational space, the future of humanity as we know right now. And also, we needed to look into the governance issue. Governance is as important, all the physical and chemical aspects, but also this have to be worked together with financing. So money, especially for developing countries, is not a small issue, as well as public policy. How to do the integration between these 3 different components is something that social scientists and economists need to work together. And then finally, we have to build up a new society, basically taking care of the planetary health, because our planet is not in very good health, as you can see, very, very easy. And the pathway is already provided by the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Brazil, as also Germany, is actually part of these 17 development goals. And then we have really to work in build up a new society. And I left here 3 messages. The first one is that it's essential to avoid a collapse of the global climate system. I think that is very, very obvious. Second, Brazil, due to tropical location, is one of the countries that will be most affected. Increasing 3 degrees in temperature in Stockholm, Helsinki, or in Montreal will be very different from increasing 3 degrees in Palmas, Tocantins, or Cuiabá. That's a very important message. We are much more vulnerable to climate change than most of the other countries, with the exception of the African countries. And this, we have to do our homework. And then basically only with a more fair planet and less social inequality, we will be able to build a sustainable world, because we are dealing not just with physical, chemical, biological aspects, but also socioeconomic is as important, or eventually more important, than what we are doing with our planet. Thanks for the attention.
Gabriela, you are free to invite. Wow. Exactly. Oh, yeah.
All right. What challenge to talk after these two professors. Laura asked me to speak English, but I have to be honest that I'm confident about my English, but because I think that most of you speak Portuguese, am I right? So I express myself in Portuguese and try to invite you to reflect about some questions that I have to professors, and then we open to the audience. It's okay? Muito bom. Acho que, como alguém que está na área da saúde global e trabalha nessa interface com mudanças climáticas, crise da biodiversidade, impactos da poluição na saúde, na qualidade de vida, na forma como as pessoas se conectam mais ou menos com o que a gente chama de meio ambiente ou de natureza, acho que as falas dos dois professores foram bastante inspiradoras, né? Primeiro, no sentido de pensar, se temos toda essa informação científica muito bem colocada e sintetizada por eles, por que estamos aonde estamos? Acho que essa é a primeira pergunta que eu gostaria de endereçar aos nossos professores. O que falta efetivamente para que a gente possa começar a agir, possa promover uma transformação, uma mudança incremental, radical, para modificar esse cenário e evitar esse colapso climático que o professor Artaxo nos provoca nesse último slide. Acho que a segunda pergunta fundamental é os três pilares apresentados pelo professor Artaxo, né, financiamento, governança e políticas públicas, são objetos centrais do campo da saúde global. A gente estuda exatamente isso, né? Quem são aqueles que financiam as respostas às crises globais que afetam a nossa saúde, a qualidade de vida das pessoas e colocam uma parte importante da sociedade em uma situação ainda mais vulnerável? Quem financia essas respostas, essas ações? Quem participa desses processos de tomada de decisão? Quem são esses atores que performam o que a gente chama de governança? E que políticas públicas são essas que são pleiteadas, por quem são pleiteadas e por que elas ainda falham bastante na sua eficácia, na sua eficiência? Esse é um objeto central para o campo da saúde global, né? A gente também poderia pensar que uma outra perspectiva do campo da saúde global, e aqui eu trago bastante a fala do professor Christoph, é entender as bases desse modelo predatório de exploração da natureza que nos levou até aqui. Não à toa, a Organização Mundial da Saúde reconhece, né, que entre as várias emergências de saúde que a gente lida, recentemente, né, agora a gente comemora os 5 anos, né, da pandemia de Covid-19, que nos mostrou quão vulneráveis nós estamos às novas epidemias, né, o quão desconhecemos ainda os vírus que estão circulando por aí, como eles podem nos atingir. Mas a Organização Mundial da Saúde, diferentemente do Fórum Econômico, como o professor Artaxo colocou, reconhece que a emergência climática é a principal emergência de saúde global que estamos enfrentando nesse século XXI. Então, fica aqui, de novo, um convite para os nossos professores, mas também provocar vocês, enquanto público presente, porque, mesmo reconhecendo e tendo todos os elementos que temos da gravidade da emergência climática e como ela é um acelerador da pobreza, das iniquidades, das desigualdades sociais, as nossas ações ainda são tão limitadas, são tão lentas. E, por fim, minha última pergunta endereçada aqui para a gente refletir é o que é sustentabilidade? Afinal de contas, por que a gente insiste nessa aposta de que a resposta para esse conjunto de crises reside na sustentabilidade? Que sustentabilidade é essa? Faz sentido a gente, depois, né, de quase 4 décadas insistindo nesse discurso do desenvolvimento sustentável, pensando um pouco na institucionalização, né, dessa ideia de desenvolvimento sustentável, lá no relatório da década de 80, né, sobre o nosso futuro comum, dizer que a gente busca a sustentabilidade como uma chave para virar o jogo? E se sim, que sustentabilidade é essa? Eu fico por aqui, Laura, com algumas provocações. I hope that the translation works very well, professor, and please come here, professor Artaxo. E se vocês tiverem qualquer questão, pergunta, por favor, enderecem também. A Laura estará aqui me ajudando a mediar esse debate.
Eu estou de olho também no meu celular, porque talvez vão chegar perguntas a partir dos nossos quase 50 participantes online, né?
Okay. Can we start with Professor Christoph?
Well, you're asking a natural scientist why the socio-economic change doesn't happen. That's a bit funny because I don't know, frankly speaking. But what I can say is that we're not having a knowledge problem. We're having a problem of implementation. And well, my basic understanding of economy is that, well, if you want something to change, there is economic measures that you can take. Like if you want to have people smoke less, you put tax on tobacco. If you want to have people drink less, you put tax on alcohol. It at least works to some extent, quite well. So if you want to have people use less carbon dioxide, you have to put tax on carbon dioxide. And I think this is pretty easy. And it has been proposed as early as in the 90s of the last century by people, for example, like James Hansen from the US. In a very good TED talk that you can find in the internet still. He says, well, if you increase the carbon tax slowly, but like every year in a plannable and foreseeable way, and if you give the money that goes into the budget of the state back to the people in an equally distributed way, then you will have a market effect that gradually phases carbon dioxide usage out of the market. That would have been working if it would have been implemented some 25 years ago. We are trying this now. I think in Germany we are on some track. Well, I think the carbon tax at the moment is around 40 euro per ton. Maybe it's only 35, I'm not sure. It should be 60 euro per ton, or that's about the same as US dollars, so 60 US dollars per ton. Then we would see a clear effect in the market. But the less carbon dioxide there is in the market, the higher the tax must be to phase out the rest of it until the middle of the century or 2045 or whenever you want to be at zero carbon emission. And at that time in the 40s of this century, the tax will need to be around 300 euros per ton. So I'm taking clearly an economist point of view. And I think it can be done if you give the money back into the market, equally distributed, so people that depend on having the option to buy energy, and that is actually people in the low-income parts of the society, they must profit more from the redistribution than people with higher income, because otherwise lower income part of the society will not be able to live up to the change that's needed. So they will simply then not be able to afford their lives anymore because it takes time for this transition. So I think there is clear ways how it could be done. The question is why we are not doing it. So there is obviously too much economic power, and that is with people that have, well, short-term prospects of selling fossil fuels. And you can see there's two nations in the world at the moment that are, I would say, on the decline over the next 30 years. Those are those two nations that are producing the main share of the fossil fuels, and they are the main also distributors of fossil fuel in the world, and that is Russia and the US. Both countries at the moment take a policy that clearly leads them into real difficulties. On that way, however, the danger is that they lead us into similar difficulties. So the geopolitical situation suggests that countries that are not that much dependent on the fossil fuels industry, like Brazil, for example, and hopefully Germany soon as well, that these countries are becoming allies in transferring and transforming the world into a fossil-free economy-based worldwide system. That can be done. But you can clearly see that the allies are then not US aid. It's not the Russians, obviously. It could be on this path China, despite all the other political reasoning why we are cautious about it. But in terms of the social economic transition into a fossil-free future, I think China needs to be on board as much as Latin America, Africa, and Europe. That would be my approach to it. But the basic point is, we know it. We know that carbon dioxide has a greenhouse gas effect since 1824, when the first experiment was made by Jean-Baptiste Fourier, the French mathematician, in a laboratory where he clearly found that carbon dioxide has a greenhouse gas effect. And the first statement dates from 1860-something from Eunice Foote, the female American researcher who said that an atmosphere with a higher concentration of carbon dioxide must have a higher temperature. So it is no knowledge gap at all. Yeah? It's only a question whether we take action and whether we force our societies, our politicians into the right direction by hopefully democratic decisions.
Thank you, Christoph. Professor.
Yeah, I just want to call the attention to the issue of the lack of the global governance that we have right now in the world. That, in my opinion, is the basis of why we do not take any decision. And if you participate in any of the COPs, I participate in the last 10 or 12 different COPs assessing the Brazilian government in the negotiation table. It's really incredible. It's a lesson on how the world works, because they are there defending the interest of their own country, being Brazil, Germany, or Russia, or China, or whatever. Nobody takes care of the planet. Everybody looks to your own industrial sector interest, be it, for instance, meat production and so on, and absolutely nobody looks, okay, what we are doing to the planet as a whole. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is the very short timing that, in general, enterprises, companies, and also governments, do their planning. Very few governments can plan for more than 4 years. China maybe is the only exception to that. But as Lula took office, okay, what we are planning to do in the next 4 years is this and this and this. What about after 10, 20, 30, or 50 years? Who will take care of the strategy to keep the planet sustainable? So basically, if we do not build up a governance system that can really deal not with the small interest from sectors or for individual countries, but deal with the interest of the whole humanity, in the whole planet, we will not solve the climate issue. And the second thing, if you don't build up a system where people can think on the sustainability of the planet in 10, 20, or 50 years, as it's very clear that we have to do that, it will be very, very difficult for us to get out of the climate emergency.
Thank you. Perguntas? Professor Saraiva.
I would like to suggest that we collect 1, 2. Is there more questions? Immediate? Okay, so please, Saraiva.
Português. Obrigado aos dois, e a Gabriela, por essas falas todas muito inspiradoras, assustadoras. Não é a primeira vez que eu vejo, então só reforço o susto, né? Uma questão que eu queria trazer para vocês é até que ponto vocês acham que nós temos um problema de percepção de risco. Essa falta de percepção correta dos riscos talvez esteja motivando as pessoas a não tomarem ações, as pessoas, os governos, as empresas. Por mais que a gente tenha todas essas evidências, né, A impressão é que as pessoas acham que isso está longe no tempo, longe na geografia. Então, eu posso continuar vivendo assim, eu como pessoa física, a minha empresa enquanto empresa, meu governo como empresa. Será que isso é um dos componentes dessa nossa inação, apesar do conhecimento?
Passamos, né, coletamos mais uma pergunta da Marisol. Tem mais perguntas?
Boa tarde, obrigada pelas apresentações. Eu aprendi muito, é muito bom, né, em perceber como a ciência é importante para entender o que está acontecendo aqui, né, por que está chovendo assim em São Paulo, né, enfim, como a ciência tem respostas para isso. Eu vou aproveitar essa oportunidade de estar diante de autoridades eu vou tentar ser breve aqui no meu comentário, né. Recentemente eu descobri que o Plano Clima, que é a agenda brasileira, né, para responder ao Acordo de Paris, está destinando dinheiro para mineração de lítio no Vale de Jequitinhonha, que é onde eu estou fazendo pesquisa agora, né. E aí as populações que estão sendo ameaçadas lá pela chegada da mineração são indígenas e quilombolas. E eu estou falando isso porque nas ciências sociais, né, o que a gente tem pensado quando a gente fala em antropoceno é o modo como as crises ambientais elas não vão afetar igualmente as diferentes pessoas, né? E também no que diz respeito a a uma certa convenção, né, sobre quando começou, que atividade, né, se foi a Revolução Industrial, quando é que começa, né, o antropoceno, essas discussões sobre o antropoceno, sobre um marco, várias das evidências e dos argumentos atualmente apontam para o processo colonial, né? Então, a minha pergunta é bem simples, assim. Eu fico muito feliz de ver que há um interesse por parte de vocês, né, uma abertura em produzir ciência transdisciplinar, né, em reconhecer a importância, né, das ciências sociais e o modo como a gente tem que trabalhar colaborativamente, né. Eu fico curiosa e a minha pergunta é: vocês estão familiarizados com essas contribuições das ciências sociais e para o que a gente tem apontado, né, para o modo como porque uma coisa é a gente falar a desigualdade como uma categoria abstrata, né, e outra coisa é a gente situar o que está acontecendo. Então eu fico pensando como é que a fala de vocês seria afetada se vocês estivessem familiarizados com esse conhecimento que tem sido produzido pelas ciências humanas. Então a minha pergunta é se vocês conhecem essas teses e teorias que estão sendo desenvolvidas. Obrigada.
Eu acho que temos mais uma pergunta e temos uma pública também do público online, mas eu vou passar primeiro para você.
Olá, boa tarde. Eu gostaria de fazer uma pergunta, levando algumas coisas em consideração. O professor comentou, né, sobre a pegada de carbono, sobre o nosso papel individual, né, nesse processo de redução do nosso impacto no planeta. E eu me lembrei do relatório do Oxfam, que levantou que, no dia 10 de janeiro, o 1% mais rico do mundo já tinha consumido a sua cota anual de pegada de carbono. Então, como lidar com um mundo em que esse 1% faz toda essa devastação e que vai continuar não ouvindo a ciência, não ouvindo o papel das sociedades? Então, até que ponto, né, a gente pode ter um argumento técnico com esse público, né, com essa parcela da população que é muito pequena, mas muito expressiva nesse assunto específico? Então, enfim, gostaria de colocar isso, né, como tratar isso.
Obrigada. Ainda estou tentando sintetizar essa pergunta que chegou pelo nosso chat, que tem duas partes, pelo que eu entendi. E acho que repete um pouco as perguntas que o professor Saraiva, Marisol e você também destacaram. Como vocês acham é possível integrar as políticas de saúde pública com estratégias de mitigação e adaptação às mudanças climáticas, de modo a garantir que os ODS relacionados à saúde e à ação contra a mudança climática ambiental sejam alcançados de forma sinérgica, especialmente em comunidades vulneráveis que enfrentam os maiores riscos associados à crise ambiental atual.
Obrigada, Laura. Acho que nós podemos endereçar as respostas agora, né?
Por favor.
I mean, it's a bunch of very serious questions and not easy to deal with. Clearly, the risk perception, which is a field of science in itself, tells us that Homo sapiens is very good in taking steps towards risks that are just in front of him. Like if you come across a tiger in the Atlantic rainforest, no, it's not a tiger then, it's a jaguar or a puma or something. You have a clear reaction in your body and you know what's going on. If you are walking for 6 weeks through the rainforest and you have never seen a snake or a puma, then you feel like, oh, there is no risk at all. The Homo sapiens is very bad in having emotional perception of the probabilities of risks. It's like you go on the motorway not wearing a seatbelt, and for the first 3 kilometers, this feels awkward. And if you do the same thing over 2 hours, you feel very comfortable. The risk, however, has not changed at all. Yeah? And that is with you, the same with humanity. So we are not really good with abstract risks, and we are not really good with getting combining risk and a long-term perspective. So therefore, I think at this point it really needs science, it really needs mathematicians that give us a good idea about the probabilities. And then, like if you have an instrumentally driven aircraft, really look to the instrument and look at the probabilities that there are and what's the risk. And that may also help in governing the directions that we have to take for the next decades. And then your great questions on the social sciences and if I got it right on also studying indigenous societies, was that right? Or did I get that wrong? Well, I can't say that I have an inside knowledge because, well, in the 21st century, it's really difficult to be a generalist in all types of sciences. I mean, I think I have some background with geography where you also deal with economics, with social sciences, and so forth. But for sure, we need to take every effort of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary cooperation, and we have to invest into talking to each other, learning from each other, getting to know the specific language that's spoken in different fields of arts, science, and also governance, to find the best ways to deal with this situation that's really complicated. And I personally think that intervention using the arts, using theater, using music is very powerful because it can change something in the perspective that people take towards a specific problem. So that is an approach that I really appreciate. Then I think that was the question in the back somehow, whether such a technocratic approach that you might have perceived from our two contributions would really heal the planet. And clearly it doesn't, and it's not sufficient. Yeah? But ignoring the science, the natural science, and ignoring the technological options that there are will also lead to nowhere. Yeah? You can pray for rain, but it doesn't change the physics of the atmosphere. Yeah? You may understand the physics of the atmosphere, but that does not, that knowledge does not kind of approach the heart and the soul of people. Both perceptions are really important, and there needs to be an exchange to bring these things together. I need to allow myself also as a natural scientist to feel this fear, this scary that you've been mentioning. I need to feel the grief. I need to feel the rage that comes with knowing about the inequality that's there. I have to acknowledge this. I have to keep this within me so that I can live up with the power of, like a Maori warrior from New Zealand, bringing this back with the haka into the society. Yeah? Combine this with a clear idea of a scientific approach that doesn't ignore the physics of the atmosphere, I think is a powerful set of tools. And I would encourage everybody to go beyond their field of expertise from their study programs, from their research that they've been doing, and from their teaching and learning that they are doing, and take every and any opportunity that's there to step aside and have and integrate new perspectives. Yeah? Only this will bring the political momentum that we need to drive the societies into the right direction. And no one can oversee everything that's important in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals transformation. No one ever. There's so many studies that try to see how, when you do this, what's the reaction here, and so on. But it's complex systems. And it's not only physical complex systems, it's also social complex systems, cultural complex systems of the arts. And a complex system cannot be controlled. Therefore, you cannot completely understand it. Therefore, you cannot completely control it. And therefore, you cannot be sure whether the trajectory that you're going is leading to where you really want. You always have to be open, seeing a new picture and saying, "Oh, this is a chaotic behavior. I didn't understand that." There's no way having clear projections to the future. Yeah, because there is too much uncertainty, there is too much non-linearity, and there is too much abrupt cultural changes that may happen. And that's why we have to be so open to integrate the different perspectives. But the question is great. Thank you very much.
Eu vou responder em português, porque acho que fica mais fácil, para ser bem entendido, né? Pergunta do Saraiva. Percepção de risco, né? Será que o presidente da Petrobras, da Shell, não sabem o risco que as mudanças climáticas causadas pelas emissões de gás de efeito estufa que eles estão produzindo não existem? Não vamos ser naivos, e todos nós sabemos a resposta dessa pergunta. Eles sabem muito melhor do que nós. Será que o Trump não sabe das consequências ambientais que eles estão fazendo nos Estados Unidos agora? Sabe muito melhor do que os cientistas que ele está mandando embora da NOAA ou da NASA. Quer dizer, essa questão de percepção de risco, eles têm esse conceito de percepção de risco muito claro em todas as ações das companhias de petróleo. Por exemplo, a indústria do fumo. Será que a indústria do fumo não sabia que cigarro dá câncer? E não mataria milhares de pessoas, como está continuando a matar agora? Claro que sabe. Né? Então, não é a questão da percepção de risco que está em jogo aqui, é a questão dos interesses no curto prazo. O que manda é o seguinte: quanto é que eu vou ganhar de bônus sendo CEO de uma companhia nos próximos 5 anos? O que vai acontecer daqui a 10, 15 ou 20 não é meu problema. A questão é problema de quem? Quem vai lidar com esses problemas daqui a 10, 15 ou 20 anos? E esse é um enorme desafio para a nossa sociedade. E isso, como eu falei, vale para governos, vale para empresas, vale para sindicatos, vale para todos os setores da nossa sociedade. Enquanto isso não mudar, vai ser muito difícil, né? A pergunta da Marisol também é interessante. E até a pergunta é interessante. Vocês estão familiarizados com os impactos sociais e econômicos do que a gente trabalha? Eu não conheço nenhum físico, químico ou biólogo que, ao mesmo tempo, não trabalha com as questões sociais e econômicas. No IPCC isso não existe. Isso tudo está em cima da mesma mesa. Porque acho que, como a apresentação do Christoph colocou, e eu também, quer dizer, vocês percebem uma visão integrada. Nós não trabalhamos só sobre forçante radiativa do sistema climático. a gente trabalha com os impactos na biodiversidade, na saúde humana, nos ecossistemas e assim por diante. É assim que hoje a gente faz ciência integrada. A ciência mudou. Há 30 anos atrás seria mais ou menos como você coloca, mas isso não funciona mais hoje. Olha os papers, por exemplo, você vai ver que não tem paper de física básica da atmosfera que não vai lidar com os potenciais impactos sociais e econômicos. E isso é muito bom. A ciência mudou, o IPCC mudou e vai por aí afora. A pergunta da Oxfam é interessante, né? Eu tenho um slide desse relatório que você falou do Oxfam, e esse slide mostra o seguinte: as 8 pessoas mais ricas do nosso planeta têm os mesmos recursos financeiros do que metade da população do planeta, que são 4 bilhões de pessoas. Não há mundo sustentável que possa ser construído com esse grau de desigualdade econômica. E esta desigualdade econômica está aumentando no Brasil e em todos os países do nosso planeta. A China é um bom exemplo disso, a Índia é um bom exemplo disso, Estados Unidos nem se fala, né? Quer dizer, as leis estão fazendo com que quem é rico fique mais rico e quem é imigrante ou pobre vai piorar a sua situação econômica, né? Porque, obviamente, quem domina o poder político e os meios de comunicação é esta parcela dos 8 bilionários. Isto vale também aqui no Brasil. Você pega jornais, você abre o Estadão, você abre a Folha, e você vê claramente uma linha editorial muito bem focada, muito bem objetiva, e paga por quem tem o capital, não a população brasileira como em si. E, por último, sobre a questão da integração de políticas na questão da saúde pública, né? Nesse ponto de vista, o Brasil tem uma sorte enorme, porque, no Brasil, o Ministério da Saúde é um dos ministérios mais integrados com a questão ambiental e com a questão climática, né? Não só agora, no tempo da Anísia Trindade, ou agora no tempo do Padilha. Inclusive, nós, daqui a 3 semanas, vamos ter uma reunião nesta sala aqui, da Fiocruz com a USP, para fundar um centro de saúde e clima na Amazônia. Tá? Porque é uma região onde a assistência à questão da saúde está ficando absolutamente crítica, quadro de mercúrio, queimadas, e vai por aí afora, né? Então, a Fiocruz procurou a USP e falou: nós precisamos de ajuda nisso. Então, nós vamos estruturar isso, um centro que vai ser em Porto Velho, né? A USP tem um campus avançado em Rondônia, e nós vamos trabalhar com essa questão, porque ela é estratégica para o país, porque são milhões de pessoas que vivem na região amazônica, basicamente com a questão de atendimento à saúde de uma maneira muito, muito precária. E, quando você pega, por exemplo, a minha filha, se ela... Em setembro, ela teve uma crise de asma. Eu levei ela no pronto-socorro, e em 5 minutos ela estava tomando oxigênio, etc. E tal. E um índio, no meio da Amazônia, exposto a uma fumaça muito maior do que a gente teve aqui em São Paulo. Esse índio não tem posto de saúde, não tem oxigênio para tomar, não tem nada disso. A assistência é muito pequena, e eles sofreram muito com a grande seca de 2023 e de 2024. Então, a gente quer trabalhar para minorar esse impacto da saúde humana associado com as mudanças climáticas.
Bom, agradeço muitíssimo a Laura, que já me olhou com aquele olhar. Não temos mais tempo para perguntas, o recado está dado.
Tempo para presentes e para agradecer imensamente essa mesa maravilhosa.